And welcome again to a new tutorial, the second part in optimization of an engineering model. In part 1 we looked at a step file, importing it into Blender and optimizing it through the process of removing unnecessary geometry or applying a decimate modifier. And that's all done to reduce the triangle count. The amount of triangles that you need just depends on the final application, but I'll just show you the introduction on how to use the tools to remove them. In this part, we'll look at the STL file, as it is different than the step file. We look at separating the different parts and preparing it mainly for animation. If you're interested in the optimization part, please review the first tutorial as it goes deeper into that aspect. But without further ado, let's go ahead. The first thing we want to do is download FreeCad. You can type in FreeCad in the Google browser or any search program, or go directly to their website, which can be reached at freecadweb.org. We are just going to use this to convert our model. I am aware of their problems with the topology naming, which is not something I cover in the tutorial. We are just going to use it for conversion of our file, and this program works perfectly for that purpose. Let's click on the link. It brings us to the website of FreeCad, and the option download now is available. Click on download, you get your execute file which you can install. I just opened FreeCad and let's import the file that we want to convert. So we go to file, we go to open, and we go to the directory where we stored the step file. Let's select it and press open. And it takes about 10 seconds in this case to open up. And I can zoom out again so we get to see the full model. It starts out with the same view as the step file because the operating modus of the robot is included. And if I were to look on the left hand side, I see that all the different parts of the step are available. So part of the robot is included inside of the operating area. We do not need it, so we have two options for exporting this file. We can either delete this part, or we can select everything that we need and eliminate this one and then export it out. I'm just gonna select all the parts that we need, which I'm gonna hold Shift down and select all these parts. I'm going up again, I click on File, I click on Export. Let me first zoom out, because you got a whole long list of file types which you can export as. We need to scroll down almost to the bottom to find the STL file, which is down here. And then I need to give it a useful name, and I'm just gonna call it robot STL. And then I'm gonna save this. And now I'm ready to import this into Blender. I am back in Blender, and let's open the file that we just saved. I can delete the cube because I don't need it. I'll go to File, I'll go to Import, and I select the STL option. Then I need to select the robot STL file that we just saved. Click on the file. Let me zoom out and then import the STL. The first thing that you notice is that we have a huge robot. And if I press on the N button, we see that this thing is over a kilometer long. Let me just scale this down into millimeters because the scaling is a bit off between FreeCad and Blender. I'm just going to zoom in. If I press the period, I'm brought back to the model. And we see this is oriented over 90 degrees incorrectly for us because the Y is up in FreeCad and the Z is up in our program. So we can rotate over the X in 90 degrees. And we have the model imported. And as you can see, we have it available. At the first glance, it looks very similar to the step file, but there is a huge difference. So if we look in the hierarchy, we see that there are no different parts available. this is one big mesh. And this is also something that we can see when we open up the statistics module, which is located right here. And let me just open that up. I can look at the statistics and I see now that we have a huge amount of vertices. So if I zoom in, you see that we have over 660,000 triangles and over 330,000 vertices. This is going to consume a lot of processing power and we want to reduce this. Also, if I tap into the model, then it takes a little bit to open up and you see there are actually a lot of vertices right here. Benefit is that the dripping that we saw on the previous model is not available in this model because this has so much more details to it, but it's going to be so much harder to process. Then we also need to separate the different parts by hand, unfortunately, because we have one big file and we want to move the axes over one another and start the animation. So what we need to do now is eliminate all the parts of the different axes. So let's dive into this. Let's zoom into the model for a second. And I'm just going to orient this in front of us. I'm tapping into edit view. And what I want to do now is I want to separate the bottom part from the rest. So actually this part here, including the top part here, is something I need to separate from the rest of the module. So how are we going to do it? And as you can see, the step has great benefits over this process because now I need to fiddle and find all these different vertices that I can eliminate. So what I need to do is I need to select the bottom part and I can press B and then I got box select. And when I release this, you can see it's selecting part of it, but unfortunately it does not select the back. So what I need to do is I need to go up here and select this icon, which means I can select the front and the back simultaneously. So let me clear this out and get back. So I'm selecting the front and the back. The view changes because I can select now everything in one go. And I'm selecting all the bottom part right now, all these parts, and I need to zoom in. So this is relatively quick that I can do it like this. So I did a very good job here, but where do I want to stop? I would like to include these axes. So I'm going to include this part as well. I got almost everything down except for the part on top. And what I can do now is press the Ctrl and the plus button. And now it's got the next axis as well. Do this again, Ctrl plus, and I can see if it starts the next model, and I'm in luck. In this case, no, I need to go back one, and now I got all the vertices that I need for the base. I press on P, and I'm gonna separate this selection, and now I'm tapping out of it. I got one part that I can move around, that I can use for the animation, and I'm back to the step file that I had. So let me just call this the base, and I call this double nord, and that's my first part. Then the second part is going to be the one on top, and this is going to be a little bit harder to do. If I tap in, you can see that I have a lot of work to do to separate this from the rest of the model. So I can do the base by pressing B and having the box select. I can do this relatively quickly, but the parts that I do not want to include are the axes right here. So I need to call it fiddle around and do it like this. I can go through the whole process, but I can show you that this takes a little bit of time. So if you have the option to get a step file, that will make your life much easier. The STL offering this one big and huge file will just require you to separate a lot of parts of it. So looking at the different sides of it, looking at this, and I need to see if I got everything ready, and I think I do. I'm pressing P again, separating this part, and let me see what we've got here. And you see, this is what happens, and I just missed a little part of it, and I need to include this part with the other model. But this is unfortunately the process you have to go through when you receive an STL file. So I missed this part, so what I would do is just go back before I moved that part. I know what I missed, which is right down here. So I can select this part. I can try to use it by Ctrl+, which is not going to work perfectly, but I can use the box select, selecting this whole part that I want. Then I need to select the top part here. Now I got the missing part. I'm going to select this part. And now it has become a separate part as well. And right now I'm going to make it a little bit more clear. This part and this part should be together, so that will be Ctrl+J. And finally, I have my second part available. And if I look at it now, I have separated the second part as well from the model. So that's available for the animation part of it. I need to do the same thing for the rest of the part. So I'll be doing that and I'm back when I'm finished. So after the speed up that I just showed you, this is the process that you have to go through to separate the individual parts. So the great benefits of the step file is all the parts come as individual parts that you can use directly. If you got an STL file, and especially for larger configurations, there's a lot of work involved to separate them if you want to make it into an animation. Also, if you want to use specific texturing and so on, you'll have to go through this process. It's tedious, but that's the way it works. And I just showed you how you can do it with the box and circle select. Having the front and the back selected, it is doable, but it takes a bit of time. I've put all the parts of the robot back together. And if we look on the right hand side in the hierarchy, we have all the different names. And let's use the same names as we had with the step file. So let me just zoom out. The origin point of all these different parts is not really convenient at the moment. I'll address that in the next tutorial, but just quickly, if you want to move this part, you need to go all the way to the bottom and then you can move it up. This is quite cumbersome to do. If you want to change this, you would need to go to the object part here on the top hand side. And let me just clear that. Go to object, then go to set origin and say set origin to geometry. And that moves it to the geometry, which makes it a bit easier to maneuver this part around. One thing I would like to address quickly in this tutorial, but I'll dive in deeper in the next one, is the organization of the parts and the folders. If we look on the right hand side, everything is inside a collection called collection. it's better to use some useful naming and have different collections available that store the parts. A collection is like a folder where you store everything of the same type or everything that belongs together. I have a tendency to name one of the folders lights. Let's call this lights. Well, let me tap this correctly. And let's keep all the parts of the robot in a folder called robot. Then I'm gonna select all of the robot parts and I just hold down Control to select the individual parts. I could have also hold down Shift and select the last part. So with all the parts selected, I'm pressing M and I'm gonna move all the robot parts in the folder robots. And when I click this one, I see everything is now in the robots folder and that's going to be easier to work with. Alrighty, we are ready with the optimization process of the models and we are ready for the next step, which is including the animations in the models. This is also useful to create virtual reality, and just as a small example, I put the small animation on the screen, which is really easy to make once you set up the bone structures and the IK kinematics. If you're interested how to make this, follow along with the next tutorial. Love to see you there. Bye bye.